I never expected a simple favor to change everything, until the widow across the street showed me what loneliness, trust, and love truly feel like. The story opens with the narrator noticing the widow across the street, a woman in her early 40s, moving through her front garden with a quiet, deliberate grace. There is a subtle elegance in the way she carries herself, a poise that suggests both life experience and a certain guardedness, as if she has learned to navigate the world on her own terms. She is physically attractive in a mature, understated way. Her hair catches the late afternoon sunlight in soft chestnut waves, her posture is confident yet relaxed, and there is a calm steadiness in her movements that draws the narrator's attention. The narrator, a young man in his mid-20s, has often passed by her house on his evening walks, quietly observing but never speaking. Today is different. She opens her front door, and when she sees him, she greets him with a polite, almost shy smile. There is a warmth in her eyes, deep, slightly melancholic, but not without humor, that immediately sparks a sense of curiosity and cautious attraction. She asks him for a small favor, perhaps retrieving a package from the front porch, or watering a few potted plants that have been left untended. The favor is simple, almost mundane, but it feels significant to both of them, as it becomes the excuse for their first real interaction. From the narrator's perspective, every detail of the encounter feels amplified. He notices the soft cadence of her voice, slightly husky from years of laughter and sorrow, yet firm enough to carry quiet authority. When she hands him the items, their fingers brush, a brief, almost accidental touch that sends a subtle shiver through him. It is not overtly romantic, but the sensation lingers, drawing his attention to her warmth, the slight pressure of her grip, the gentle curve of her wrist. He becomes acutely aware of her proximity, the faint scent of her perfume, and the soft rustle of her clothing as she moves. Emotionally, the narrator experiences a mixture of fascination and hesitation. He is aware of the age difference, a decade or more, and wonders whether his interest is appropriate. Yet there is a pull he cannot deny, the combination of her quiet strength, understated beauty, and the sense of vulnerability she subtly reveals. He finds himself observing her small gestures, the way she brushes a loose strand of hair from her face, the brief, almost imperceptible glances she allows him to catch, and the gentle sigh as she adjusts a heavy plant pot, all of which communicate more than words ever could. The scene ends with a lingering moment. He hands her the last item, their eyes meet, and for a heartbeat, time seems to pause. There is no rush, no forced conversation, just a quiet acknowledgement of a new connection forming. It is the kind of moment that promises the slow unfolding of trust, curiosity, and perhaps something more tender in the days to come. After agreeing to help, the narrator finds himself stepping across the threshold of the widow's home for the first time. The space is warm and inviting, filled with the quiet, lived-in energy of someone who has managed a household alone for years. Soft light filters through sheer curtains, casting gentle shadows across walls lined with framed photographs and small trinkets, each telling silent stories of a life well lived. He senses an intimacy in the air, a kind of comfort that immediately contrasts with the nervous flutter in his chest. The favor itself is simple, perhaps carrying groceries up the stairs, arranging boxes in the kitchen, or fixing a small appliance. Yet these mundane actions become a conduit for subtle connection. She moves around him gracefully, close enough that their shoulders brush occasionally, yet without discomfort. Each accidental touch sends a ripple through him, the warmth of her hand grazing his, the soft fabric of her blouse against his arm, the faint scent of lavender that lingers when she leans forward. It is physical contact, but gentle and meaningful, a quiet signal of trust and mutual awareness. Conversation flows in a natural rhythm. She shares small stories about her daily routines, occasionally laughing at minor mishaps, and the narrator notices the ease with which her guarded exterior softens in his presence. He listens intently, offering light observations, careful not to intrude, but genuinely engaged. Her voice has a soothing quality, low, warm, with subtle undertones of fatigue from life's challenges, yet tinged with humor that catches him off guard and makes him smile. He begins to perceive the contrast between their ages not as a barrier but as a source of fascination. She possesses a calm self-assurance, a wealth of lived experience, and a quiet resilience that contrasts with his youthful curiosity and occasional hesitancy. This contrast draws him in, making him hyper-aware of the small, intimate gestures she allows, a hand briefly resting on his forearm while explaining a point, a reassuring pat on his shoulder, or the way she tilts her head slightly when listening, creating a private bubble of closeness. The narrator notices subtle shifts in her expressions, the quick flash of vulnerability when she glances at a photograph, the softening of her lips when she laughs, the tiny crease of her brow when concentrating. Each nuance deepens his admiration and emotional investment, creating a tension that is as much internal as it is between them. He becomes attuned not only to her movements but also to the small rhythms of her presence, the quiet steadiness of her breathing, the delicate cadence of her laughter, and the reassuring warmth when she gestures near him. By the end of this interaction, what began as a simple act of helping a neighbor evolves into a moment of shared understanding. Both feel the quiet stirrings of curiosity and affection, a sense of mutual recognition without the need for overt words. The narrator walks home afterward, replaying each gesture, each glance, each subtle brush of skin, aware that something delicate yet profound has begun, a slow, tentative bridge between their worlds. In the days following their first encounter, the narrator finds himself returning to the widow's home under the guise of simple favors, watering plants, delivering groceries, or helping with minor repairs. Yet each visit reveals more than he expects. He begins to see the layers beneath her composed exterior, the quiet loneliness she carries, the soft traces of sorrow in her eyes, and the little habits that speak of a life once shared with someone now gone. These moments of vulnerability are unspoken invitations for him to connect, and he approaches them with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and growing affection. One afternoon, as they sit together on her small balcony overlooking the street, she opens up about her late spouse. Her voice is calm but tinged with melancholy, sharing anecdotes of shared routines, whispered jokes, and small regrets that linger like shadows in her memory. The narrator listens, sensing the careful balance she maintains between openness and reserve. There is an unspoken trust in her willingness to speak about pain, and he feels privileged to be included in this quiet intimacy. Their physical proximity becomes a language of its own. As she gestures toward a photo or reaches for a cup of tea, their hands brush lightly, a fleeting touch that communicates reassurance, warmth, and an emerging tenderness. He becomes acutely aware of the texture of her skin, the gentle pulse of her wrist beneath his fingertips, and the warmth radiating from her presence. These small, nonverbal signals stir a quiet tension between them, subtle but persistent, growing in resonance with each shared smile, sigh, or glance. Emotionally, the narrator grapples with his feelings. The age difference and social expectations hover in his mind, yet they feel secondary to the connection that is forming. He admires not only her external beauty, the grace in her movements, the quiet confidence in her posture, but also her resilience, her intelligence, and the delicate vulnerability she allows him to witness. This mixture of admiration, protectiveness, and subtle attraction creates a complexity in his emotional state, a slow-burning awareness that something profound is taking root. She, in turn, begins to respond to his presence with small signs of comfort and acknowledgement. A brief touch on the forearm when emphasizing a point, a smile that lingers slightly longer than necessary, the way she leans subtly toward him while speaking, all gestures that convey trust, interest, and a gentle invitation to intimacy. These interactions are tender and understated, yet they carry the weight of unspoken understanding. By the end of this part, both characters experience a deepening bond. They have begun to see each other beyond surface impressions. He sees her loneliness and quiet strength. She sees his sincerity and attentiveness. The narrative tension shifts from mere curiosity to the possibility of something more meaningful, yet unspoken. Their relationship is no longer defined solely by favors or polite conversation. It has become a delicate dance of emotional proximity, subtle physical touches, and shared confidences, laying the foundation for the slow-burn romance to unfold. Over time, the narrator and the widow settle into a rhythm of shared, everyday moments. What starts as simple acts of neighborly help, carrying groceries, fixing a leaky faucet, or tending to plants, evolves into subtle rituals that feel almost sacred. Mornings become particularly meaningful. Sunlight filters softly through her curtains as he helps her set the table for breakfast or prepares coffee side by side. There's no rush, no expectation, only the quiet presence of one another in a space that feels safe, warm, and slowly intimate. Physicality in these moments is understated but electric. Hands brush while passing a teacup or arranging flowers on the windowsill. A shoulder grazes his as they navigate the narrow kitchen space. Each contact is fleeting yet charged, leaving a warmth that lingers long after they part. The narrator notices details he hadn't before: the subtle scent of her perfume mingling with the aroma of fresh coffee, the softness of her sweater when he adjusts it slightly as she leans over, the rhythm of her breathing when she pauses to watch the sunlight shift across the room. These small sensory touches, so ordinary on the surface, deepen the emotional intimacy between them, creating a quiet tension that neither speaks aloud. Their conversations also take on a new depth. They discuss books they've recently read, memories of travel, and the small routines of life that make her home feel lived in and comforting. Laughter emerges in gentle bursts, sometimes sparked by his slight awkwardness or her playful teasing. He notices the way her eyes linger on his face during these exchanges, the soft tilt of her head, the subtle way she mirrors his gestures. These understated signals of attention carry far more weight than words ever could, drawing him closer emotionally with each passing moment. The narrator is acutely aware of the delicate push and pull of this evolving connection. He feels a mixture of admiration, protectiveness, and curiosity, tempered by the knowledge of their age difference. Every shared glance, gentle touch, or fleeting brush of hands reinforces an unspoken understanding. They are comfortable together, yet the potential for something deeper hovers quietly beneath the surface. Her presence brings a sense of calm and warmth that he finds intoxicating, yet he treads carefully, honoring both her space and the unspoken boundaries between them. Even mundane tasks take on a quietly intimate rhythm. Sorting groceries, adjusting curtains, or watering plants becomes an opportunity for small, shared gestures, a hand resting lightly on his forearm, a soft laugh at a minor mishap, or the subtle leaning in when speaking close enough to hear each other over the ambient sounds of the home. These moments are tender and human, establishing the foundation for the slow-burn romance that is steadily unfolding. By the end of this part, the narrator senses that their bond has deepened in ways that are both comforting and quietly thrilling. The age gap and societal expectations are present in the back of his mind, but they feel secondary to the warmth, trust, and subtle emotional resonance they are cultivating. The slow, careful dance of proximity, touch, and shared attention sets the stage for the emotional complexity and tension that will continue to grow in the following chapters. By this stage, the narrator begins to feel the subtle but undeniable pull of attraction. It's a quiet awareness at first, a lingering glance, the way her laughter catches in his chest, or the warmth of her hand brushing against his during some small task. Yet beneath the calm routines, there is a growing storm of internal conflict. He finds himself questioning whether it is appropriate to feel this way, conscious of the age gap, of societal expectations, and of the quiet vulnerability she has entrusted to him. The tension is not loud or dramatic, but persistent, simmering beneath the surface like a heat that cannot be ignored. The widow, too, begins to exhibit signs of reciprocation, subtle and nuanced. She lingers slightly longer in conversation, smiles more warmly, and allows small touches that would have seemed incidental before, a reassuring hand on his forearm, guiding him as he steps over a threshold, or the brief warmth of her shoulder against his when moving through a narrow space. There is an elegance to her restraint. She conveys interest without words, and each gesture is imbued with layered meaning that the narrator can feel but cannot yet fully name. Every encounter carries heightened awareness. He notices how she tilts her head when listening, the slight quiver in her voice when she laughs, the soft exhale of breath when their hands brush. His own body reacts in kind, a small shiver of excitement, a tightening in his chest, the subtle ache of wanting more but holding back. He is painfully conscious of the fine line between appropriate closeness and the unspoken desires stirring between them. Conflict arises in small, quiet ways. Perhaps she shares a wistful memory of her past love, leaving him to wrestle with feelings of inadequacy or fear of intrusion. Or perhaps a neighbor or friend comments lightly on their frequent proximity, causing him to question whether pursuing any deeper connection is wise. These moments heighten the emotional tension, as he balances respect, admiration, and the growing desire that has begun to color every interaction. Yet these challenges also draw them closer emotionally. Vulnerability, he realizes, is shared through small acts, a pause in conversation that lingers, a smile that lasts just a heartbeat too long, the unspoken acknowledgement in her eyes when they meet. They are building intimacy not through grand gestures, but through the accumulation of these small, poignant interactions. Every touch, every glance, every whispered word or shared silence becomes a thread in the complex tapestry of their relationship. By the end of this part, the narrator is acutely aware that their connection has shifted from casual friendliness to something deeply stirring. There is an unspoken agreement in their interactions, both are aware of the tension, both are drawn to it, and both are navigating it with care, patience, and an emotional openness that has become rare in their lives. The foundation for a profound emotional bond has been laid, one that will soon demand acknowledgement, courage, and a willingness to confront desires that have quietly taken root. The tension that has been building over weeks finally reaches its quiet but intense peak. It begins on an ordinary day that suddenly feels charged with significance. Perhaps a rainstorm traps them together inside her cozy apartment, or an unexpected mishap requires both of them to collaborate closely. Whatever the situation, the boundaries between everyday routine and emotional intensity blur. In these moments, both characters are acutely aware of the fragile but undeniable connection that has been growing between them. The widow's composure softens, revealing the layers of vulnerability she has carefully guarded. She may speak of her loneliness with a tremor in her voice, or recount a bittersweet memory of her late spouse, allowing the narrator a glimpse into the depth of her heartache. The narrator listens, fully present, his own emotions a complex weave of admiration, empathy, and a slowly awakening desire. Their previous hesitations dissolve under the weight of mutual openness, creating a rare and intimate emotional space. Physical closeness is heightened in this part, but remains tender and respectful. They might sit side by side on the couch, shoulders touching, hands resting lightly against one another. A forehead brush or a gentle cheek touch conveys warmth, reassurance, and the electric hum of unspoken emotion. Each gesture is deliberate yet subtle, evoking intimacy without words. The narrator becomes acutely aware of the gentle pulse of her hand in his, the soft scent of her perfume, the warmth of her body leaning slightly toward his own. Every small touch amplifies the emotional resonance between them. Internal conflict reaches a crescendo. The narrator struggles with the social implications of their age difference, the propriety of his feelings, and the uncertainty of whether she reciprocates beyond fleeting gestures. She, too, feels the stirrings of desire and connection but holds back, testing the boundaries of their emotional closeness. There is a shared hesitation, a mutual acknowledgement of tension, and a longing that neither has fully articulated. Despite the conflict, there is also clarity. They recognize the trust, respect, and care that have developed into something profound. The emotional intensity is balanced by tenderness, creating a moment of catharsis. The narrator might gently hold her hand, feeling the warmth and steadiness of her heartbeat, while she allows herself to rest her cheek momentarily against his shoulder, small, human acts that signify the acceptance of their bond. By the end of this part, both characters have confronted their feelings without the need for dramatic declarations. They understand the depth of their connection, the attraction, and the mutual vulnerability that has drawn them closer. The slow-burn tension has reached its emotional apex, and the foundation is laid for the story's resolution, a delicate, intimate, and YouTube-safe affirmation of mutual care, affection, and the promise of love that transcends age and circumstance. The story reaches its gentle, heartfelt conclusion in moments that are quiet yet profoundly meaningful. After weeks of small interactions, subtle touches, and shared confidences, the narrator and the widow have come to understand the depth of their connection. What began as a simple favor has blossomed into a slow-burn relationship rooted in trust, respect, and tender affection. The age gap, once a source of hesitation, now feels secondary to the warmth and intimacy they have cultivated together. The final scenes are filled with ordinary yet deeply connective rituals. Morning light streams through her kitchen window as they prepare coffee side by side, their hands occasionally brushing as he passes her a mug or she hands him a plate. There is laughter, gentle teasing, and an ease of presence that comes from weeks of growing familiarity. Every small gesture, her hand resting lightly on his arm, the brush of his fingers against hers while reaching for a spoon, is imbued with affection, charged with the quiet knowledge of what they mean to one another. Physical intimacy remains tender and YouTube safe. They sit close together on the couch, shoulders touching, occasionally leaning into one another in a way that feels natural rather than deliberate. A brief cheek-to-cheek touch, or the soft pressure of her hand against his conveys comfort, trust, and emotional closeness. The narrator notices the subtle warmth of her body, the faint scent of her perfume, the rhythm of her breathing as she speaks softly about her day, sensory details that make every moment feel alive and intimate. Emotionally, both characters have achieved clarity. The widow allows herself to feel seen, valued, and appreciated for the strength, vulnerability, and grace that define her. The narrator, in turn, recognizes that his admiration has grown into genuine love, a love that is patient, respectful, and deeply attuned to her needs. There is no rush, no dramatic confession, only a quiet acknowledgement of their bond, expressed through lingering glances, small touches, and shared smiles. If additional characters were present, such as a supportive friend or neighbor, the story ensures that all relationships reach a satisfying emotional balance. Conflicts and hesitations that arose earlier are gently resolved, reinforcing the theme that love can be tender, multidimensional, and emotionally rich without being overtly romantic in the conventional sense. The closing moment is a simple yet resonant tableau. Perhaps they stand on her balcony watching the sun set, shoulders brushing, hands occasionally touching as the narrator reflects on how a small favor led to a profound connection. It is a culmination of weeks of subtle tension, emotional vulnerability, and mutual care. The story ends on a note of warmth, hope, and quiet joy. The slow burn romance has found its equilibrium, leaving viewers with a sense of satisfaction, intimacy, and the beauty of love that develops through patience, respect, and shared humanity.